The stars over the moon's surface were sharp and silent. But deep inside the old human listening post, silence had just been broken. A faint signal pulsed through the static. The technicians inside had heard strange sounds before, scraps of alien chatter, bursts of encrypted codes, but this was different. It was long, deliberate, and locked behind an encryption far beyond what was usually used for open galactic communication. It wasn't meant for them. Lieutenant Harris leaned over the main console, his eyes narrowing as the signal repeated. "Is that council code?" he asked quietly. The older operator beside him, a man who had been listening to the stars for 20 years, nodded without taking his eyes off the screen. "Yes, and it's not public. This is private, restricted to the inner circle. You shouldn't have been able to catch it." The transmission was directed through secure relays light years away. But some glitch, some cosmic accident, had bounced it straight into Earth's forgotten lunar array. As the operators worked, the encryption began to break apart under the listening posts, decoding systems old, but stubborn machines that dug through data with patient hunger. Lines of alien language scrolled across the screen. It wasn't perfect. Some words were missing, distorted by distance and interference, but the meaning was still clear enough to make Harris's stomach tighten. The council was not debating trade agreements, not discussing science or peacekeeping. This was war planning, and the target was not human. The message spoke of a purge, the complete removal of a species from existence. The name came through clearly: the Torva, a quiet, peaceful people who lived on green worlds near the galactic rim. They were traders, healers, and shipwrights. They had never raised a weapon in anger. Decades ago, when humanity's first interstellar ship limped into their space with half its crew dying from a strange cosmic illness, the Torva had saved them. They had shared medicine, food, and navigation data without asking for payment. And now, the council had decided they were a problem. The reasons were buried in twisted language: security concerns, destabilizing influence, unregulated expansion. But everyone in the listening post knew what those words really meant. Someone powerful wanted their resources, their territory, or simply their removal. Harris took a deep breath and stepped back from the console. "We have to send this to command." Within an hour, the recording was being played in a shadowed room deep under Geneva. General's intelligence. Chiefs and ministers sat in silence, the alien voices echoing off the walls. When it ended, there was no argument over the truth. This was real. The debate was over what to do next. "Contact the council," one official said. "Demand an explanation." "This could be a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" General's voice cut through the air like a blade. "They're planning genocide. They didn't even think to tell us." "We're not supposed to intervene without approval," another reminded them. "You know the treaties? Can't start another conflict in council space, especially not without the oldest man in the room." A retired admiral who had fought in humanity's first war beyond Earth leaned forward. His voice was quiet, but every ear turned to hear it. "If we wait, the Torva will be gone. The council will have their excuse ready, and all we'll be able to do is write angry letters to the stars." "Then what?" someone asked. "Do you want us to act without permission? That's an act of war against the council itself?" The admiral's eyes were cold. "That's what it takes." There was a long silence. The hum of the air recyclers seemed loud in the stillness. One, heads turned toward the commander of Earth's defense forces. She had not spoken yet, only listened. Now she looked around the table and said 5 words that would change the galaxy. "We're not waiting for them. No vote. No delay." Orders began moving through encrypted channels within the hour. Not to diplomats, not to media outlets, but 2 fleet commanders scattered across human space. By the time Earth's cities drifted into night, a dozen massive warships had already begun silent preparations. Crews were summoned without explanation, their families told only that duty called. Supply lines shifted. Weapons were brought online. Star charts were marked with a single red circle, the Torva homeworld. On the moon, the listening post shut down the receiver that had caught the signal. No record would be left in the official archives. As far as the council knew, their plan remained secret in orbit. Far above the sleeping Earth, the first of humanity's warships detached from its dock. Its engines stayed cold, running silent, its hull dark against the stars. One after another. The others followed, drifting like shadows toward the edge of the solar system. They had no approval, no formal mission. No one had asked them to go, but they were going anyway. And somewhere in the deep black between the stars, the Torva still slept, unaware that death was already coming for them, that humanity had decided to stand in its way. The stars above Earth's night side were calm, but in the shadow of the planet, a silent gathering was taking shape. Far beyond the reach of civilian eyes, a ring of massive human warships drifted without lights, their engines cold. From the ground, they would look like nothing more than a handful of faint, moving stars. But up close, they were giants, armored, hulls bristling with weapons, their black surfaces swallowing the faint glow of distant suns. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Mara Vance stood before a darkened viewport. She could see other ships in the distance, faint outlines against the void. She didn't need light to recognize them. Each silhouette was burned into her memory. These were Earth's fastest, deadliest warships. And tonight, they weren't supposed to exist. Her orders had come in a sealed data capsule, hand-delivered by a courier who said nothing and left without saluting. When she opened it, there was no preamble, no explanation, only coordinates, a timetable. And one short message: leave before dawn, no council contact, no transmissions. The crews had been called back from shore leave with no notice. Some still didn't know why they had been summoned. The engineers whispered among themselves as they loaded extra munitions. Medics quietly stocked medical bays with more supplies than usual. Even the cooks noticed the subtle changes: more rations. Packed for long travel, no return date. The fleet was moving under black silence, no outgoing signals. No pings to navigation buoys, no friendly chatter on open comms, only tight beam. Encrypted bursts between flagships and escorts, too narrow to detect without being directly in the path. In the hangar bays, pilots checked their fighters in tense quiet. No one joked. No one asked questions out loud, but the look in their eyes was the same. They knew they were going somewhere dangerous. And they knew it wasn't sanctioned. High above the fleet, an old surveillance satellite turned its lens toward the ships, logging their movements, and then, suddenly, it went offline. Whether by accident or someone's deliberate action, no one would say, but within minutes. The only witnesses to the fleet's departure were the men and women aboard those ships. At precisely 0200 hours, Captain Vance's voice came over the fleetwidechannel.com/steady without the usual formalities. All ships begin drift departure. Keep drives cold until we clear the heliopause. No signals, no lights. We are shadows until further orders. The great ships began to move, slow and silent. They didn't accelerate, not yet. Instead, they let the gravity of the Earth and Moon pull them outward. A quiet slide into the deeper black dot as they passed the orbit of Mars. The fleet finally came alive. Massive engines rumbled to life, pushing thousands of tons of steel and weaponry toward the edge of the solar system. They angled toward the coordinates sent in the capsule, a narrow, little-used slipstream gate that would take them directly into contested space back on Earth. The Galactic Council's envoy to humanity was just beginning his day. His aides brought him messages, reports, and the latest political bulletins. He read them without urgency, unaware that the most important thing happening in human space was already beyond his reach. Hours later, Council communique arrived at Earth's central government. It was formal and heavily worded, the Council, informing humanity of a forthcoming intervention against the Torva. The message politely explained that the operation was already in motion, and that Earth was expected to remain neutral. It was signed with the emblem of the Council's inner circle. By the time that message reached the war room in Geneva, the fleet was already days ahead, far beyond the point where anyone could call them back. Inside her command chair, Captain Vance studied the growing star map on her screen. Every jump brought them closer to the Torva homeworld and closer to the enemy fleet the Council had likely dispatched. Oh, she knew what they were sailing into. This wouldn't be a skirmish. It would be a warning to the galaxy. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the steady vibration of the Resolute's engines beneath her boots. Then she opened them again and looked toward her bridge crew. "We get there first," she said quietly, "and we make sure they remember we were there." The crew didn't answer aloud. They only nodded, and the silent fleet pushed on into the dark. In the frozen shadows of an asteroid belt, the human fleet waited. The rocks here drifted slow and silent, their surfaces glittering faintly in the pale light of a distant star. The ships were hidden among them, hulks of steel and armor lurking. In the dark like predators in tall grass, engines were cold. Lights were dead. Every system that could give them away was shut down. Inside the Resolute, the air was tense. Crew members whispered, their voices low, as if afraid the enemy could hear them through the vacuum. On the bridge, Captain Mara Vance stood over a glowing tactical display. Red blips crept closer. Alien destroyers, sleek and deadly, sliding toward the Torva homeworld. The reading showed dozens of them. More than enough to wipe the planet clean in hours. No council ships guarded the Torva system. There would be no witnesses, no trials, no defenses. Just the quiet erasure of an entire people. A voice from the sensor pit broke the silence. "Captain, they're powering weapons." Vance didn't look away from the display. "Hold fire." Until my mark, the fleet sat in stillness, each second stretching longer than the last. On the surface of the Torva world, cities gleamed under soft sunlight. The people below had no idea what was coming. They had no fleets, no orbital defenses. Only trade vessels and science craft drifted in their skies. On the alien destroyers, weapon arrays unfolded like the petals of a black flower. Targeting beams swept down toward the surface. The first wave of death was about to begin. "Range?" Vance asked. 2 minutes to optimal strike distance, her tactical officer replied. She didn't hesitate. "All ships, fire." The silence shattered. Human warships roared to life, reactors flooding power into weapons. In an instant, the black space between the asteroids flashed with burning light. Railguns fired in silent fury. Missile hatches opened, spitting swarms of guided death. Particle beams lanced across the void, punching through the shields of the nearest destroyers before they even knew they were under attack. The alien formation broke apart in panic. Ships spun wildly, trying to bring their guns to bear on this new threat. But the humans had the element of surprise, and they were faster. One destroyer erupted in a silent fireball, torn in half by a direct missile strike. Another drifted dead, its engines blown clean off. Alien com channels burst with shouted orders and demands. "Identify yourselves. You are interfering in a council-sanctioned operation. Ceasefire immediately." No human answered. The Resolute swung around a tumbling asteroid, its broadside weapons spitting molten metal at close range. 2 more destroyers fell before they could even fire back. The Torva, watching from the ground, stared at the skies in confusion. Their orbital sensors showed battles raging above them, ships they had never seen, fighting to keep death from. Reaching their world, some prayed, some wept. None understood why these strangers had come. The alien destroyers finally managed to regroup, forming a defensive shell. Their return fire was fierce, ripping into the armor of a human cruiser and sending debris spinning into the dark. But the humans didn't break. They pressed in closer, using the asteroids for cover, striking from unexpected angles. One by one, the enemy ships fell. The survivors scattered, engines flaring bright as they fled into deep space. On the bridge of the Resolute, Vance watched the last enemy signature vanish from her display. The com officer turned to her. "They're broadcasting to the council. They'll report this." "Good," Vance said coldly. "Let them tell the galaxy exactly what happened here." Far away, in the shining chambers of the Galactic Council, the first reports were already arriving. The humans had attacked without permission. They had engaged in a war that was not theirs. They had destroyed ships belonging to a sanctioned operation, and the rest of the galaxy had just learned something they would never forget. Humanity had acted without asking. and they were not afraid of the consequences. In the towering halls of the Galactic Council, tension burned hotter than the suns outside its windows. 1,000 voices filled the vast chamber, speaking in dozens of alien tongues. Holographic forms of leaders from across the stars hovered in the air, their images flickering with agitation. The central floor, a polished expanse of silver and light, was a storm of accusations at the highest dais. The council speaker struck the base of his staff against the floor, sending a sharp sound echoing through the chamber. "We will have order." The noise faded, but the anger remained. A scaled delegate from the Varen Syndicate pointed a clawed hand toward the hologram of Earth's emblem. They acted without approval. They attacked a council operation and destroyed official vessels. "This is a direct violation of the Galactic Charter," another voice, deep and resonant, rumbled from the form of a giant crystalline being. "Violation? This is an act of war. If left unpunished, every world will think they can ignore the Council's authority." But not all spoke in condemnation. From the far side of the chamber, a smaller delegate, an avian with bright silver feathers, raised its voice. "And yet they saved the Torva. They stopped an unjust slaughter before it began. Can the Council deny that the Torva are innocent?" "Innocent?" the Varen delegate hissed. "They are expansionists, a destabilizing force, a convenient excuse," the avian interrupted sharply. "One we've all heard before when a rich world lies in someone's path." The chamber erupted again, shouts overlapping in a wave of sound. Some called the humans reckless heroes. Others named them dangerous criminals from her private seat in a shaded balcony.
Counselor Sereth of the Core Systems watched the argument unfold.
She had been in politics for centuries, and she knew what this meant. The humans had not just disobeyed the Council, they had shown the galaxy that the Council could be ignored. That kind of defiance was dangerous. Messages were already flooding through hidden channels. Several trading blocs were demanding sanctions against Earth. A few military coalitions were preparing to discuss response options behind closed doors. In a quiet corner of the chamber, the envoy assigned to Earth received his orders. His smooth, pale face betrayed nothing, but the words burned in his mind. "Summon their leaders. Command they explain themselves. If they refuse, we will make an example of them." Hours later, across the galaxy, the Torva homeworld held its first celebrations in decades. Streets were filled with music and light. Families gathered in the open air, speaking in hushed tones about the ships that had come from nowhere to protect them. They didn't know the names of those strangers. They only knew they had been saved. On the Resolute, Captain Mara Vance watched the celebrations through an orbital feed. She stood with her arms crossed, saying nothing. Around her, the crew felt the same mix of pride and unease. They had done what they came to do, but they all knew the cost was still coming. A soft chime broke the quiet. The communications officer turned pale as she read the incoming data. "Captain, Council has issued a formal summons to Earth. They're calling this an unlawful military intervention." Vance gave a thin smile. "Unlawful to them. Necessary to us." "Captain," another officer said, "the message includes a warning, sanctions, blockades, even the possibility of armed enforcement." Vance's eyes hardened. "Then we prepare for it." In the capital of Earth, the highest leaders read the same message. Some argued for apology, for negotiation. Others reminded the room what had been at stake. Finally, the commander of Earth's defense forces stood, her voice calm but unshakable. "Let them come. We will not bow for doing what was right." The message Earth sent back to the Council was short, written in cold, precise words. "We did not ask for permission. Do not need it. Try to stop us." When the Council read it, silence fell across the chamber, the kind of silence that comes just before something breaks. The slipstream gate at Nereth's gate shimmered faintly in the darkness, a vast ring of alien metal hanging between two dim stars. It was quiet here, too quiet. Normally, the space around such a gate would be filled with trade ships, patrol craft, or passing freighters. Now, it was empty, as if the galaxy itself had stepped back from this place. The Resolute dropped out of faster-than-light travel, its hull gliding into the void with predatory calm. One by one, the rest of the human fleet followed their drives. Fading to a low hum, the navigation officer studied his console. "Gate is clear, Captain." "Ow. Traffic detected." Captain Mara Vance didn't look at the screen. She looked past it, out the viewport, her eyes fixed on the silent gate. "It's too clean," she said quietly. Moments later, the trap was sprung. From the dark beyond the gate, ships emerged. Not one or two, but hundreds. They came from all angles, snapping into real space with weapons already hot. Sleek frigates, heavy cruisers, destroyers bristling with cannons. The enemy had been waiting. Their formation closed around the humans in a tightening ring of steel and fire. On the bridge of the Resolute, the tactical display flared red with threat markers. "Multiple contacts, over 200 ships," sensor officer called out. "They've got us surrounded." A murmur of unease rippled through the crew, but Vance didn't flinch. She studied the map for a heartbeat longer, then smiled. A sharp, dangerous smile. Exactly as planned. The order came fast. Signaled the fleet, execute pattern Omega. Before the enemy could even issue their surrender demand, the human fleet moved. From their holes, they released hundreds of small pods, mines invisible to standard scans. They drifted outward, vanishing into the black, and the mines lit up, each one a burst of blinding energy. In an instant, chaos ripped through the enemy lines. Several cruisers vanished in burning silence, their hulls torn apart. Frigates slammed into each other while trying to avoid the hidden explosives. The human ships surged forward through the opening, their guns blazing. Railgun slugs punched holes clean through armored hulls. Missiles streaked between the wreckage, hunting the largest targets. Enemy coms erupted with panic. This was no random counterattack. The humans had been here before the trap was even set. They had studied the battlefield, mapped every asteroid, calculated every shot. The enemy fought back hard. Bright lances of plasma carved across the void, scoring the armor of the Resolute. A smaller human destroyer took a direct hit to its engines, spinning out of formation in a trail of molten debris. But the fleet didn't stop. Vance's voice was steady over the coms. "Push through, break their line," and they did. Ship by ship, the human fleet smashed through the tightening noose, turning the enemy's ambush into a slaughter. The gate itself burned in the background. Several of its massive support struts shattered from stray fire. When the last enemy vessel broke formation and fled into the dark, the space around Nerif's gate was littered with drifting wrecks. Human salvage crews moved quickly, pulling survivors from shattered hulls, friend and foe alike. On the bridge, the tactical officer looked up from his screen. "Reports say the Council fleet in this sector is standing down. They're afraid of us, Captain." Vance's eyes stayed on the wreckage outside. "Good," she said softly. "We'll keep them thinking twice before they try this again." Far away, in the chambers of the Galactic Council, the battle reports arrived like thunder.
Ow.
Their carefully planned strike had not just failed, it had been turned into a warning. And for the first time in living memory, the Council began to wonder if humanity might not just be reckless, but unstoppable. A lone human vessel emerged from the dark, its hull blackened from past battles, its engines running low and steady. It did not carry a fleet. It did not carry weapons ready for firing. Instead, it drifted into the heart of enemy-controlled space like a shadow, unhurried, unafraid. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was silent but tense. The corridors were empty, except for a small honor guard standing outside a reinforced chamber. Within that chamber sat Earth's envoy, Commander Elias Corrin. Dressed not in a military uniform, but in the plain dark suit of a diplomat. In his hands was a single data crystal, no bigger than his thumb, and on it was the kind of truth that could shatter worlds. The enemy flagship loomed ahead, a towering city of steel suspended in the void. Its guns tracked the human ship as it approached. Comes crackled with a cold alien voice. "Identify yourself or be destroyed." "This is Commander Corrin of the United Earth Directorate," the envoy replied. His voice was calm, measured. "I request an audience with your high command." What I carry will determine whether your people see another sunrise." There was a long pause. Then, to the surprise of the human crew, the flagship's weapons powered down, docking clamps extended. The envoy ship was pulled into the massive hangar bay, surrounded by soldiers in gleaming armor. Corrin walked alone down the ramp, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous bay. The alien officers watched him with suspicion, their claws resting on their weapons. He was escorted into a vast council chamber, lit by cold white light. At the far end sat the enemy's supreme commander, a towering figure with skin like molten stone, its eyes sharp and unblinking. Corrin stepped forward and placed the crystal on the table between them. "Inside this," he said, "is evidence your people hoped would never be seen. It details every illegal operation, every massacre, every violation of the Council. Charter your fleets have carried out. Names, dates, locations, even the orders that came from this very room." The alien commander's gaze didn't shift. "You expect me to believe you, human?" Corrin tapped the crystal once. "You don't have to believe me. The rest of the galaxy will. Once this is transmitted, you won't be able to hide. You have two choices. End your campaign against the Torva and face trial, or we end it for you." The room fell silent. The alien counselors whispered among themselves. Some looked angry, some looked afraid. Finally, the commander spoke. "Threaten us in our own hall." "No," Corrin said, leaning forward. "I'm giving you a chance, because my people are already preparing the final strike. This meeting is the only thing keeping them from pulling the trigger." The alien commander's eyes narrowed. "If we refuse," Corrin's voice was steady, his words deliberate, "then you will not have time to regret it." Outside, deep in the black, the human fleet was indeed moving. Hidden behind asteroid belts and drifting in stealth, they were assembling for a coordinated strike across every major enemy stronghold. Warheads were armed. Attack vectors plotted. In less than 12 hours, the largest military action in human history would begin. Back in the chamber, the alien leader finally leaned back. "We will." "Consider your terms." Corrin nodded once, turned, and walked out. I didn't need to look back to know what they were thinking. Didn't matter. Because even as his shuttle detached from the flagship and returned to the shadows, a quiet message pulsed through encrypted human channels. "Strike preparations continue. The galaxy." Didn't know it yet, but whether the enemy accepted the offer or not, humanity was ready to end this war on its own terms. Across the galaxy, long-range sensor stations began to fail. At first it seemed like a scattering of technical glitches, a relay going dark here, a listening post losing contact there. But within hours, whole sectors reported the same thing. Silence. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, technicians scrambled to explain it. Military officers from dozens of species stood over flickering star maps, watching huge swaths of space go blind. No communications. No navigation relays. No tracking data. It was as if the stars themselves had gone quiet. Then, in systems thought to be secure, massive shadows emerged from the void. Human warships, dozens, then hundreds, appeared without warning above enemy strongholds. They didn't arrive through the usual gates or known slipstream routes. They came from directions no one had ever expected, as if they had been waiting in the dark all along. In the enemy's primary command center, alarms blared. Defensive fleets scrambled to intercept, but it was already too late. The charge, its engines blazing, its broadside weapons unleashing a storm. In minutes, orbital defense stations were nothing but drifting wrecks. Human ships moved with terrifying precision. Each strike was targeted power plants, command hubs, weapons caches gone in seconds. There was no bombardment of cities, no destruction of civilians. This wasn't war for conquest. This was dismantling an enemy's ability to ever raise. A fleet again, in the council chambers. Live feeds poured in. One by one, enemy worlds went dark as their military infrastructure vanished. The humans weren't sending demands, weren't offering terms. They weren't talking at all. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Mara Vance stood at the viewport. watching the largest enemy shipyard collapse in on itself after a precisely placed barrage. Her second-in-command stepped up beside her. Reports. From all fleets, objectives neutralized. No losses, Goodvance said. Her voice was flat, almost cold. Transmit nothing. Let them wonder what comes next. By the time the human fleets pulled back into the void, they left behind a galaxy that had fallen eerily quiet. The enemy's war machine was gone. The Council, stripped of the power to punish Earth, could only watch in silence in the aftermath.
Ow.
Messages from across the stars poured into Earth's secure channels, some offering uneasy alliances, others swearing never to provoke humanity again. But for most there was only fear. And fear was exactly what Mara Vance had wanted. Far from home. In the calm after the storm, she stood alone on the Resolute's observation deck, staring into the deep black between the stars. She spoke barely. Above a whisper, but the words carried through the empty room. We don't wait, not for anyone.